Sup Shredders, my name is Logan aka Spiderhands and welcome to an SP Reacts where today we have ourselves another 5 tracks from an act named Luna Production off of the Manic Madness Manifestation project. And if we switch over to here, we have all 5 of these tracks on YouTube and we're going to be listening through them from start till finish and we're going to hear what we think. Starting with Song 1, Devotion, Love. Where are we going with this?
Carved your face into the pages of my skin. Every shadow that you cast feels like heaven I'm in. If the world dares to touch you, I will tear it apart with a blade made of laughter and a shrine in my heart.
Great vibrato on those vocals there.
This is devotion wrapped in velvet disguise, a vow in my breath and a flame in my eyes. If love is insanity, I'm gladly confined. I'll worship your ruin like it's holy and divine.
And such a full body to the double bass tone as well.
I would follow your footsteps through the ruin and flame. Every scar on my body is a prayer to your name. I will smile while I'm bleeding if it keeps you in sight. Every drop is an offering to keep you alive.
We just navigate our range so well.
Wrapped in velvet disguise, a vow in my breath and a flame in my eyes. If love is insanity, I'm gladly confined. I'll worship your ruin like it's holy and divine. I could pluck out the stars just to let your feet dress the night in your colors, so the silence repeats. If forever is fragile, I will shatter the end. I will guard you in ashes if it means you're my friend.
Wistful little trumpet thing on the side at the moment.
This is devotion wrapped in velvet disguise, a vow in my breath and a flame in my eyes. If love is insanity, I'm gladly confined. I'll worship your ruin like it's holy and divine.
So that was Love, Song 1, Devotion. So this song, I think that it is about someone who'll do anything they can to show their devotion, to show their love for someone, even guarding them as ashes, as long as they're a friend. Adoration, maybe almost obsession. It reminds me of Death Note when I was looking at the art for it. And it does, I looked through the description because there's a little kind of explanations of things, these things, a little bit of extra context and lore. And it makes a lot of sense, like if you know Death Note, you know how Misa feels about light, if I understand correctly. And so it's that kind of unwitting duty towards that this track is about. I think that one of the things it does so well here is it discusses the perspective of someone who is both feeling a sense of vulnerability about how kind of like fragile they are, whilst also doing anything they can to call out to the person to let them know how much they mean to them and how much they will do for them. It's not just, adjusting the intensity or dynamics of how we're singing for the sake of keeping a track interesting as we go through it. It's also, simply trying to make it sort of appropriate to the subject matter that we're discussing. So I think that we managed to handle that here really neatly. I think we also show a really fantastic vocal technique here, whether we're belting or whether there's a bit of vibrato, or in the more sort of gentle sections where there's a bit more sort of like breathy. It's just great range, and we are exactly who we need to be able to kind of like polish and tell the story in a way that seems both authentic and it kind of transports you into their world a little bit outside of the really sort of like fantastic vocal technique and control of the delivery of things. I think also the kind of like the double bass there adds a nice kind of earthy, kind of grounded tone to it that almost seems like someone who is in the depths of maybe suffering through this. Like that kind of obsession is leading them into a position where they are sort of like struggling with it, but they're doing anything they can to show how dedicated they are. And it kind of is very moody as it flows around the sort of like jazzy extensions there. And I appreciate that it's not just sticking with the root notes, but it's just a nice way to enter a track kind of in that low point, almost also to signal that the person is in that lower state there, with the vocals also being nicely sort of like, they juxtapose in terms of the frequency position in the frequency spectrum or in their octave range. They niche together really effortlessly. You can hear everything nice and clearly. So yeah, I feel like it's a nice sort of, it's a fantastic analog tone. And I think, the icing on the cake for me is that there's a sort of trumpet. Not only is it on the side of the stereo field, which almost is kind of a very sort of unusual thing for a lead section. Usually the lead will be in the center and it'll overtake what's happening with the vocals here. But it's almost like it's not even necessarily wanting to fully commit to the center. It's just kind of wistful with the notes that it examines that are already instantiated as per the various sort of extended chord progressions, the jazzy intonations with the bass line, everything else going on there harmonically. I think there's some guitars and other parts in there as well, but it's just a very kind of like moody tone that doesn't try to overshadow what the vocalist is doing there, and more sort of like riffs off in the mid-range there and presents an angle of kind of like moodiness that just adds to the atmosphere. So I feel like there's a nice sort of balance between the technical sort of proficiency of the instrumental parts as well as the vocals across the range, as well as trying to sort of deliver the quote-unquote vibe or aesthetic that they're trying to within this piece. And ultimately things seem very well connected, and there's a sophistication that I welcome. But we have track number 2 here, titled Chaos, Song 2, Mockery.
Oh, isn't it funny how the pieces never fit? I stitched them with a smile, and I laughed at every split. My heart beats like a metronome that's ticking out of time. But I dance between the fractures, and I call the chaos mine. La la la, I'm fine, I swear I'm fine. The voices in my head, they're just friends of mine. La la la, the world's a perfect joke. It crumbles in my hands, but I love the way it broke.
Straight to the point.
I painted all my nightmares in a lovely shade of red, and dressed up all my monsters so they tuck me into bed.
Are we getting quicker in some
Every
parts?
scar's a lullaby, I hum until it bleeds. I clap along to madness like it's all I'll ever need. La la la, I'm fine, I swear I'm fine. The voices in my head, they're just friends of mine. La la la, the world's a perfect joke. It crumbles in my hands, but I love the way it broke.
A very simple piano line, but the tempo nature of it's fascinating.
Tick goes the pretty little bomb singing. sing a hymn for the broken and the choir sings along. Oh darling, don't you worry, it's a wonderful design. Every piece of me is shattered, but the laughter makes it shine. La 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 la, I'm fine, I swear I'm fine. The circus in my skull, it's a goddamn shrine. La la la, the world's a perfect joke. It crumbles in my hands, but I love the way it broke. La la la, I'm fine. I swear I'm fine. The madness is a melody, and baby, it's mine.
There's an interesting sort of like grainy feel or tone to that piano here that I'm kind of in two minds about. Sometimes I prefer a bit more sort of like body to it, but I think it works well with the subject matter, the kind of grainness of that and the vocals. Apparently track number 2 is a manic swing of chaos, mocking joy and fractured thoughts inspired by Jinx from Arcane. I was familiar with them from League of Legends as well. I think it's more specific to the tale that is told by that. I really need to get around to watching Arcane. But in terms of song 2, Mockery, it is discussing their sort of like thought process here, the thoughts in their head, the madness that they're going through, kind of owning that sort of situation there as well, with that mentality there, how the world is a joke and basically voicing their perspective. And the way that I think follows on kind of neatly from a lot of what we were talking about with track 1, where it's less about the love for someone else or the devotion for it, but more simply looking at everything as a whole in our sort of alternate reality. Part of what works really neatly here, I think, is the fact that it doesn't stick to a similar tempo the entire time. There's a very sort of like a very sort of free tempo to it, from like the point that sometimes in the middle of like a piano line with the bump bump kind of going between the bass notes and the higher ones, it's almost like you're kind of waltzing through it, or like kind of dancing on a tightrope, and it speeds up occasionally when the vocalist wants to, and it almost sort of like makes it seem like there's just added importance to the person telling the tale here. But just it makes it more intriguing when things aren't as predictable, and especially in that kind of late stage interlude section where it gets a lot faster. There's a bit more energy behind that, and does sound a bit more sort of like manic. We're going through these swings, and so yeah, just if it, I think that the use of tempo here isn't something you get often, but it makes sense here. I think also the focus on the vocals without having a whole lot of other instruments overwhelm is important, because it basically leaves it almost like there's a sense of innocence with the keys, and the vocals are the menace behind it. And so it's almost like a weird kind of playfulness from the way that is our tempo, but there's like an offbeat kind of hi-hat that comes on the ands there in the 8th note groove there, and it really does it's kind of fuzzy sounding, almost like reality is degrading or crumbling around us. And it's just an interesting choice to have that in there. I feel like, the textures tell they tell much more of a story than maybe the actual progressions do. The progressions that you have across the keys and stuff like that are far more sort of like palatable to people who are familiar with sort of like mainstream music and stuff like that. They're not irregular. But a lot of it, again, the character, the personality comes from the actual vocal performance, the expression on the microphone. And again, I think it's the production of it, to be honest. I think especially, and actually, no, I'm going to sort of talk about the structure because I feel that's another highlight. So the structure of this track, it's nice and short at 2 minutes 46. And it doesn't overcomplicate the deals that it's going into, or the details that it's going into. And I think that that's important, because you don't always need to go on a massive journey with songs. Sometimes you can discuss your perspective, and if you've summarized it in a way where it adds a bit of an extra twist in a tale, such as again the interlude in the later half of it, with the quicker tempo and the more kind of emphasis or energy behind it, you've got the listener hooked. At this point with the previous track, we showed we can make a sort of like more contemporary, constructed kind of like piece, but like here, it's really more about the journey, again, walking on that tightrope. So I appreciate that we tell the story we needed to. We're not too sort of strict about the specific rhythm and timing of things, and that we know where to put emphasis in terms of composition and songwriting and vocals where it counts. And that we use, again, the fuzzy textures to add a sense of kind of like uncertainty about what's real and what's not. And so we got track number 3 here, Fear, song 3, Trauma. This song contains heavy themes of abuse and trauma, so just a sort of an alert there before we go into it. Oh, that glitchy kind of...
Every smile feels sharp like like a dirty knife. So I hide in the dark from this rotten life. You laugh in my chest when I beg to be still. You scream in my skull that you'll never be killed. My hands shake and burn when I try to hold air. Your voice says I'm worthless, but you're always there. I don't know if I'm me or the bastard you made. Just talking to the echo that will never fade. Break me, break me, break me again.
More tempos. Or changes the tempo.
Make me pretend, hurt me, hurt me, hurt me inside. Love me, love me, love me, then hide. Break me, break me, break me again. Make me, make me, make me pretend. Hurt me, hurt me, hurt me inside. Love me, love me, love me, then hide. Stitched up
Uncertain.
like a puppet with a string through my gut.
There's just a really kind of weird feeling to the piano on that part, and I dig as a texture and a tone, especially at the beginning, it kind of makes you feel uncomfortable, the scritchiness of it.
Like a puppet with a string through my gut. Mother pulls till I bleed and I learn not to trust. She carved me to hollow with her venom and spit. Said my worth was in blood and I better bleed it quick. I wanted to be gentle but the red won't stop. I cradle all the nightmares like a fucked up doll shop. Play nice with the children but I gag on the game. Every smile goes rotten and I choke on the shame. Break me, break me, break me again. Make me, make me, make me pretend. Hurt me, hurt me, hurt me inside. Love me, love me, love me, then hide. Break me, break me, break me again. Make me, make me, make me pretend. Hurt me, hurt me, hurt me inside. Love me, love me, love me, then hide. I don't fit in the puzzle and the edges all cut. I drink from the silence but it tastes like rust. The mirror just cracks when I look for my face. Every piece is a stranger in a stranger's place. The black blood is laughing as it spits out my name. It tells me that madness and I are the same. I dance in the carnage like a child with a toy. Hopeless and joyful, destroying my joy. Break me, break me, break me again. Make me, make me, make me pretend. Hurt me, hurt me, hurt me inside. Love me, love me, love me, then hide. Break me, break me, break me again. Make me, make me, make me pretend. Hurt me, hurt me, hurt me inside. Love me, love me, love me, then hide.
So that was song 3. A fractured lullaby of loneliness, violence, and madness, inspired by Krona from Soul Eater. Now, I'm not as familiar with Soul from Krona from Soul Eater, but it sounds like they've had a horrific journey. This song is flagrantly about abuse. Someone going through terrible times by the people that they were supposed to be able to trust and clearly can't. They've just been through horrific stuff, and it does make you feel for the character. I think part of what is so effective about this is simply how, as I mentioned, the vocals match the lyrics, but in this song it's even more pronounced. You have this quietness, almost ASMR-ish tone to a lot of the like kind of very low volume takes there. We go ding, 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 kind of like they're whispering into the microphone there, and it's like they're kind of scared of making a sound, and then eventually it's almost like they don't know love unless they're abused, so they start calling out for it, and it's just visceral in that second half of the hook. And it's not satisfying because I'm happy they're going through, but as a listener, getting that quiet and then loud is just a really sort of really effective feedback loop, especially when the backing there adjusts for accents and some of the louder parts in the second half of the chorus. The music adjusts, but not in a way where it's too sort of alienating. Ultimately, I think, yeah, the belt and a bit of distortion we get on some of the vocal takes, the glow there is really effective. There's a lot of really clever stuff going on with the actual performance, you know, the expression there, on top of what I mentioned before. I think also the pianos, little tippy taps in the upper range there, right on the right keys, the push to those at the start there, and just having nothing for a moment but that is very unnerving and uncomfortable. And I think it's trying to sort of infer a connection to the story that's being told here without necessarily needing to spell it out. it's like the creepy crawlies there, the kind of thoughts in your head that kind of stab away. You know, there's some visceral imagery discussed in the lyrics, like the string through the guts and pulling, and just you feel for them, but the music twists you up inside a little bit as well. And I think as a final note, outside of the really sort of genuinely creepy piano parts, it's the actual instrumental parts outside of that, which are very kind of like balanced. And I think what it does is almost sort of issue a faux sense of normalcy with that. It's saying, oh, you can kind of nod your head to it. And if you're not paying too closer attention to the lyrics, you might even start to enjoy the drama tension of the bass line and the chord progressions, even though they're minor oriented. You'll know something's going on, but you might not necessarily know how much. And the variations of the vocal rhythms and phrasing and stuff like that in certain parts there sort of structure things differently. And it's very effective from an actual compositional perspective. But it's also allowing a more balanced, although minor oriented sort of main sort of like backing theme there, to maybe keep people interested, and then once they understand the true horrors, appreciate the equilibrium there. Ultimately, though, it's a deep track, but it's very important music. But we have song 4, Confusion. This video contains disturbing images.
The carousel contorts in cacophonic disrepair. Chimeric effigies
Those music boxes.
the ashen air. Macabre marionettes gyrate with porcelain grins. An abattoir of laughter where the nursery begins. Opalescent fractures shimmer in the rain. Palettes of giggles overwritten by the pain. Idolic apparitions blossom crimson in the glass. Perdition wears a playground mask. Saccharine cadavers strung in licorice twine. Hopscotch catacombs enumerate the line. Candied eye that dribbles from kaleidoscopic tongues. A requiem of children who were never really young.
Brutal.
Opalescent fractures shimmer in the rain. Palettes of giggles overwritten by the pain. Idolic apparitions blossom crimson in the glass. Perdition wears a playground mask. Paper mache halos collapse in the mud. Confetti turns to cinders dripping technicolor blood. Lullabies unravel into discordant refrains, and the seesaw creaks like a noose in chains. The xylophone fractures into splinters of sound. Sepulchres of chalk scrawl names in the ground. Ephemeral silhouettes convulse in rhyme, and the clock plays tag with time.
And the clock plays tag with time as a banger of a line.
Opalescent fractures shimmer in the rain. Palettes of giggles overwritten by the pain. Idolic apparitions blossom crimson in the glass. Perdition wears a playground mask. Toy soldiers march in irregular time. Jack in the box sermons unravel in rhyme. The kite string strangles as it tangles the sky, and the jump rope snaps with a carnival sigh. Opalescent fractures shimmer in the rain. Palettes of giggles overwritten by the pain. Idolic apparitions blossom crimson in the glass. Perdition wears a playground mask. Round and round the children go. Where they stop, you'll never know. The nursery burns, the ashes fall, and the laughter swallows all.
I mean, it's horrific subject matter. So there's a few words I hadn't heard, like pampersets and idolic. I'm not familiar with those ones. That's it. It's nice when I am encouraged to learn new words by songs. A deceptive nursery rhyme of confusion and airy vibes. So I think, yeah, it's about kids who are, they're in this kind of illusory world of being young, but in reality they're taught that their youth is something which it's clearly not. There's a lot of really sadistic, messed up things occurring where they are, and they're dancing, and it's all just maybe like a facade for like, I don't like a sort of a cult-like situation or something sort of supernatural. I'm not sure, but either way, it's incredibly effective music. One of the things I think is done well lyrically is choosing words which are deliberately maybe a little more obtuse or unusual to sort of confuse people who are maybe listening to it and going, oh, what is that? Using complicated words, especially when it's the children who are going through this suffering, it's words they wouldn't know. So it's all these things they're trying to understand, but they don't really have a shot with, arguably, unless they have to grow up too quickly and understand the hard truths themselves, unless they're forced to learn those truths. And in that turn, it kind of implies a sense of confusion, which I really appreciate. I think that it's clever with the lyrics. I think that the way it's sung with lots of different vocal affectations there. We use some interesting sort of effects on our vocals to make them sound a bit sort of synthy in certain parts, to kind of twist and sort of like turn the sort of the tone and measure of them to make it seem a little bit sort of like supernatural and surreal there, to kind of help sort of like build the space and size of them, because the vocals continue to build as we go further and further, gradually surrounding us in the headphones near the end with that final sort of chorus section and outro bit. It really just seemed like we're kind of it's dawning on us, but it's kind of snuck on us a little bit too late. And it's not an easy thing to sort of go again between those high and lows and kind of use our dynamic range by that on the microphone. But it's another thing entirely to sort of change our voice to be a certain way, to know when to put like legato passages, to put a little bit sort of like modulation on for effect, to kind of like add to the ether of the performance. I think also part of what works well here is the music box. I think in terms of an instrument, it's a smart move because it adds a sense of sort of innocence to it that's honestly just a little bit sort of like messed up. Like you hear the beauty of that, but it's innately spooky because of the way that even though it's playing like major and minors and has some chromatics, some sort of like semitonal changes between loops. And isolated, to be fair, it's minor oriented anyways, but there's certain instruments that, especially when paired with horror, especially to do with children, they just add to it, and it's almost like it's inferring to a false childhood that these children never had. You can also hear the clicking of a talk. You can also hear like the ticking of a clock in certain parts there. They measure the clock playing tag with time there. Some of the parts are filtered out deliberately to make it seem almost sort of like vintage, like something that happened long ago, or to sort of make the noise seem like it's fading out, but it's still there, ringing in the headphones occasionally. And we go to like basses and more sort of contemporary drums later on, but it's just knowing how to balance these different elements in the mix, which is really effective. It's knowing not to have them all at once, to add to what the initial sort of main instruments, like again the music box, are doing, and to sort of like have the vocals as the focal point with the various ways they're presented. So ultimately, I just think it's really messed up, but it's still a great song. So just a heads up, I've been advised apparently that there's a bit of YouTube compression here. So YouTube, when you upload stuff to YouTube, there's a bit of audio compression here. So like the non-YouTube version of this, apparently it doesn't have that, but just letting you know in advance. It's Your Turn, track number 5, Manifest. Vocoder? Vocaloid? Phenomenal bass response there. Phenomenal belt there.
Gag on the daylight, fractured and blind, scraping the silence for a sliver of spine. Hyperplastic tantrum spilling septic decay. Every second combusts in the carnival flame. Crush my skull in the static machine. Severed hands twitch in the guillotine scene. Velocity and seizures in the synaptic sky. Fractaline, tearing me dry. Shatter the organ with the violin tree. Collapse in the brass like a bastard disease. Fractal void, dancing in code. Entropy bleeding where the circuits corrode. Crush my skull in the static machine. Severed hands twitch in the guillotine scene. Velocity and seizures in the synaptic sky. Fractaline, tearing me dry. Crush my skull in the static machine. Severed hands twitch in the guillotine scene. Phantom line, bury alive. Exavoid, never survive. Exavoid.
Loving the glitchy vocals here, makes sense considering the subject matter.
Tear the silence, burn the flesh, fold the body, choke the rest. Splintered voices, feral glow, nothing matters. End the show.
Okay, and it's just done. Incredibly spooky, but effective. It's your turn. So basically, I think what this is trying to say is maybe after learning all of the different things that we've heard from today, this is basically saying it's your turn as a listener to go through these things to sort of realize how it's affecting you, to sort of make you wonder whether you can relate to any of this. And if that's the extent, I think it's really cool. It could also just be like a quote unquote sort of like horror theme kind of idea. I mean, either way for a project, I think it's innately interesting. And I think it's kind of a twist and a turn there. Sometimes people just kind of round off a subject with a resolution of itself, or in typical sort of horror stuff, you don't actually have that resolution at all near the end, but lyrically just kind of fascinating. So in terms of what was done well here, I think there was this phenomenal belt from the singer around like the kind of like later half of the song, and we go up and then we come down, and it shows us that not only can we do this sort of effective kind of vocalized stuff really neatly, where the vocals become more of a synth than anything else, we're also fully capable of just like showcasing our ability to sort of like phenomenal breath control, like again technique, dynamically phenomenal, but it's also compressing it and making it kind of like digital distorted, and it's almost like the machine screaming out. And I love how effective that is. I've said effective a lot today, primarily because a lot of the fundamentals are adhered to, but it's simply also the icing on the cake is having so much range with the various sort of like vocal parts in different sections, also adding more and more. And I was getting to a point where maybe we'd had the chorus in this track one too many times, but we simplified the words and then we kind of crashed out, and that was that. I think also it was used to rhythm with this one. There were a lot of different patterns on the kicks with the various sort of like drum kits there, very comfortable with the different sort of like cymbal patterns there, the kicks and the snares, and it was an incredibly intense performance because of that. When you've got this kind of fractured, chaotic sort of like inference from the vocals, you want the percussion to kind of add push to that and add that nuance there to sort of back it up there. And 1 2 3 4, 1 2 3 4. I think it might have been that, or it might have been 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. But like to have like 16-note kicks in there, to be very comfortable with our crashes and hi-hats and our ladder elements there, and to sort of add in 16th and 32nd in a certain case for emphasis, whilst also taking the drums away when we needed things to stop for a moment and bringing it in with a pulse is just awesome. We had lots of little kind of clicky parts as well there, with a mixture of different interesting rhythms there that made us sort of like seem a bit uncomfortable, especially as we descended in certain parts there. It added again a sense of glitchiness that made sense considering the subject matter, and also having the electronic drum kits further connects to the synthesis of certain parts, and again the digital screaming and everything like that. It almost kind of sounds like you're tap dancing through the madness, if that makes sense. I think also as a final note, it's the intensity of a lot of those bass tones. So there are some synths here with distortion on them that were very sort of feisty and fiery there. And I think when you've got such phenomenal production, I'm really stoked with it. I know there might be a little bit of sort of artifacting because of YouTube's compression there, but I can hear a lot to what's going on behind that or beyond that. And there's just a lot of really cool stuff going on with the way that the bass is layered and niched within the mix there. There's no sort of arguing over weird resonant frequencies or anything like that. The bass is furious, and when it is there, you feel it. Otherwise, it's just kind of floating there and you're kind of uncertain of what's going to happen next. We have some of like the kind of keys and like maybe the music box or kind of other sort of higher end elements that are kind of spooky sounding, which again makes sense with what we're talking about there. But like the ferocious distortion that we have to certain elements there kind of makes it seem like things are becoming further corrupted, which especially as we end it, it leaves more sort of discord to end with. And the use of chromatics as a final note alongside everything else, sort of with a minor leaning overall, kind of infers a sense of sort of like lunacy, like in certain parts connected to like the second track we had there with things around it, but it's more sort of regimented in its tempo and approach to the groove. So I think this is just a final sort of like comment on the Razor Wire Thunder and a Hymn. Like that there's so much other cool stuff to sort of discuss, like again the really intriguing vocal takes, like the lines there, and the, almost the kind of discord or confusion about how the two halves of the lines connect there, like the system is corrupting itself. But we're going to talk about these tracks more in the conclusion. Because welcome to the conclusion of my review of these tracks from an act named Luna Production, this project titled Manic Madness Manifestation. So what do I think these tracks are about? So I think that it starts with love, the obsession with someone, into chaos, sort of accepting maybe the state of mind we're in and that we're not normal, and sort of maybe even embracing it. Fear, understanding where that sort of madness came from. Confusion, just sort of getting lost in a world of was feeling we're being presented with something else, but nothing is that it is. So even if we were sane, it wouldn't be necessarily that much better. And then manifest, where sort of everything comes together when you completely sort of like lose yourself to it, and then the machine turns off. I think that's basically what's going on here. It is a journey as we proceed through it, and I think as a concept is very interesting. It was really cool to sort of include like kind of lore and extra context from again Death Note and Arcane and like other ones. And I just think as an idea as well, finishing on that, you know, it's your turn, it's your turn, it's your turn, it's just incredibly spooky. And I think that when people look at that and sort of like interact with it directly, they're going to be like, oh, wow, okay, we're done. I think for a listener outside a review perspective where you're simply absorbing the tracks, it's going to be sort of a really unique experience. So I've spoken about each of these tracks individually in terms of what was done well. I'm going to give my overall thoughts on various parts of these tracks, or like on these tracks overall. I think one of the best things within this entire set list, and this is stuff I've spoken about with other music from Luna Prod that because I've reviewed them in the past, it's almost always the vocals that are a highlight for me. I love it whether it's the clean or the bouts or the sort of jazzy stuff, or the more vulnerable kind of vocals like we had in Love, or the kind of glitchy sort of vocaloid stuff that we had in Manifest. We have such phenomenal sort of vocal control, very comfortable on a head and chest voice. We have great dynamic control, difference between quiet and loud notes. We have legatos, we have vibratos sorted, we can sing and hit the notes really cleanly as well. If there is effects to kind of get things sort of sounding more sort of synthy or kind of like mid, it's fine. We understand when what to do with our vocals, at which point to produce it to get the result that we want. And so I feel at this point, even with the quietness of some parts of Fear and when we become more assertive, it's just always going to be an interesting time listening through this. There's no song I've heard from Luna Production where it's been like, I don't know why this is happening. It always makes sense. I think it's their ability to sort of decide the instruments that suit the aesthetic of the song they're trying to produce. So there were certain elements such as the double bass and Love where it kind of provided this kind of earthy, kind of like lounge jazzy kind of tone to it, where someone was at their lowest, and it added a sense of weird sort of romanticism to it. There was an emotional complexity, some of the extended harmonies that they had there, which made sense considering the subject matter. But as we go through it, we have these kind of harsher basses and stuff through Manifest. We have the music box that we have in Fear and Confusion, or one of those two, and it's just these instruments are chosen for the specific kind of like, again, the connection we have with a lot of the media we consume, whilst also that kind of perversion of innocence, like with Confusion especially. There was the kids thinking they're, suffering for a childhood that they deserved but never had, but they were lied to about it. And I think like the minimalism of the dom, bom, 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 such as in Chaos with the tempo elements as well, not just playing at a specific speed, we know how to adjust our performance in order to suit the vocals, for example, to make it a bit more sort of like organic and less regimented, but then with the busyness of what's happening rhythmically, percussion-wise, and Manifest, as well as the vocals there, when you just sort of play it a little bit straighter there. And I feel like there's that nuance and understanding of when to sort of do it and when to not, that is a consistent thing through Luna Productions music. And I think as a final note, it's actually the use of harmonies and note choices there. We just understand not only to use the diatonics, but also to use chromatics to infer a sense of like lack of security or uncertainty there. We know that we can, have our major or minor triads there, but we also kind of play with the listener's expectations a bit. We also know when to sort of play it a bit straighter, such as with Chaos, where again, with just the major or minors, it's a bit less sort of harmonically interesting, but it allows for more space to do what we want to do. With the vocals there, we know where to place our emphasis there. And I think it's also testament to Luna's ability with the vocals that they know how to navigate any of those chord progressions there. They also know they can add other instruments like the music box or the keys or stuff in certain breaks there to kind of, or it's like the higher keys that we have in Fear there, where they become almost more sort of like a kind of discordant, kind of like glitchy, kind of scary texture with very little else around it to kind of catch the listener by surprise there. It's using these instruments to play these certain chord progressions and bass lines, literal bass lines in these drum parts, but also knowing when to maybe not have it harmonic at all, like such as again with the with Fear with the higher keys. So ultimately I feel like there's a lot to appreciate with these tracks. I've had a phenomenal time with it today, and I'm glad I got to listen through it. So thank you very much for watching my review of these tracks from an act named Luna Production off of the Manic Madness Manifestation project. In terms of basic constructive critique, by the way, I feel like, again, it will be interesting to hear these without the supposed kind of like audio fragmentation, but I will say that with Manifest track number 5, I thought it sounded great, and I think honestly the fragmentation there kind of helps with the quote-unquote vibe or the presumption of things kind of breaking or ripping themselves apart. I think if there's a bit of kind of dustiness to it and kind of glitchiness, it kind of makes sense there. So I'm glad I got to hear everything as uploaded. Please go check out Luna Productions' various social medias and the YouTube page, and stay cool and stay safe, and please remember to support your local musicians and artists at this point in time, as they need the help more than ever with all the crazy stuff going on in the world. And I'll catch you in the next SP Reacts. Spiderhands out.